Shalom. I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you regarding the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, and it is as follows. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas attended an Arab League foreign ministers meeting in Egypt on November the 29th, where a discussion took place wherein the Arab League would support Palestinian efforts to submit a UN Security Council draft resolution for recognition of a Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. At the meeting, the Arab League supported Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas's plan to seek UN endorsement for a timetable for declaring an independent state while rejecting recognizing Israel as a Jewish nation. It also backed Palestinian plans to seek membership in UN agencies and international courts. The ministers set up a committee comprised of Kuwait, Mauritania, and Jordan. Arab League chief Nabil al-Arabi began seeking international support for the UN Security Council resolution. Jordan, an Arab member in the Security Council, agreed to present the draft resolution to the UN Security Council. Arab states have already given their blessing to the idea of presenting a resolution to the Security Council, but had yet to agree on a finalized draft and set a date to present it. Arab League chief Nabil al-Arabi appeared to suggest that the final draft would be endorsed and sent to the UN Security Council for a vote. It is natural that Palestine is heading to the UN Security Council to issue a resolution setting a deadline for ending the Israeli occupation, he said. The Palestinian issue has been discussed in the past, but what is new today is that the Arab states and Palestine decided to go to the UN Security Council through Jordan with an Arab draft resolution, he said. According to Palestinian officials, 7 members of the 15-member UN Security Council have pledged to support the Palestinian statehood bid. The support of at least 9 UN Security Council members is needed in order for any resolution to make it out of committee and be able to be voted upon by all UN Security Council members. As of now, the Palestinians have failed to secure the backing of 9 UN Security Council members for possible recognition of a Palestinian state. The position of the United States, which has repeatedly vetoed UN resolutions seen as pressuring Israel, will be crucial in deciding if this latest effort by the Palestinians will succeed. In fact, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warned Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas against taking any unilateral measures, threatening to impose financial and political sanctions on the Palestinian Authority if they presented their draft paper to the UN Security Council. Kerry said that the most effective way forward would be to resume peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. As a result, some Palestinian sources expressed doubt that Abbas would actually go through with the UN Security Council resolution to recognize a Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. There are Arab and U.S. pressures that will make it impossible for Abbas to take a step like submitting the draft resolution by the end of this year, the sources added. If peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians were to resume, the Palestinians have presented a number of preconditions in order for talks to continue, including a 3-month settlement freeze while the borders of a future Palestinian state are negotiated, and an Israeli recognition of the pre-1967 lines as the basis of a Palestinian state. When the Palestinians revealed their proposed text that was to be submitted by Jordan, it was rejected by the United States and other members of the Security Council. As a result, France, while agreeing in principle to the proposed Palestinian resolution, decided to present an alternative draft. France is working with England and Germany in preparing the separate text. The French-led European initiative will be discussed on December the 2nd in Brussels when U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry holds talks with European ministers during a NATO meeting. Israel Finance Minister Yair Lapid said that relations between Israel and the United States have reached such a low point that the U.S.'s assistance at the UN Security Council, including using its right to veto anti-Israel resolutions, was no longer assured. We are at an unprecedented low point in our relationship with the United States, he said. No one knows what they will do when Abbas presents his draft resolution before the UN Security Council. The U.S. vote is not assured like it has been in the past, Lapid said. Palestinian representative to the United Nations Riyad Mansour said the French are moving more and more, trying to bring all the European colleagues together, and I think that eventually they will succeed. He said that time has come to find the political will in order to work seriously for achieving the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, including the independence of the Palestinian state on the basis of pre-1967 borders. Mansour said he expected a new draft to be submitted to the UN Security Council soon, possibly in the middle of December, with a vote to quickly follow after that. The new resolution would pave the way for an international conference to launch what is widely seen as a final bid for an Israeli-Palestinian peace deal with the involvement of all key international players. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said, "At the United Nations, the French are working with our partners to adopt a UN Security Council resolution to relaunch and conclude peace talks. A deadline of 2 years is one most often mentioned, and the French government can agree with this figure." Fabius said that France is prepared to host international talks in a bid to push forward a drive for peace. An international conference could be organized. France is prepared to take the initiative on this, and in these talks, recognition of the Palestinian state would be an instrument for the definite resolution of the conflict, he said. Fabius did not specify when this conference might take place, nor did he say who might be invited. Nevertheless, he said France hoped to bring together all the main players in the conflict, citing the European Union, the Arab League, and all the permanent members of the UN Security Council. The minister has frequently said that France would recognize a Palestinian state when the time comes, arguing that a two-state solution to the Middle East conflict logically implies recognition of a Palestinian state. If these efforts fail, and this last attempt of a negotiated settlement does not work, then France will have to do its duty and recognize the state of Palestine without delay, and we are prepared to do that, he said. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict will not be solved by exploiting the automatic anti-Israel majorities in the UN bodies. You can pass anything there, he said, but that is not the way to achieve peace. The only way to peace is through direct negotiations that address all the core issues of the conflict. Israel is ready for these negotiations. Israel is ready for peace. I am ready for peace, but it must be genuine peace, a durable peace, and for that we must have a Palestinian partner who is committed to forging such a genuine peace, a partner who is prepared to confront terrorism and end incitement, a partner who is prepared to recognize the nation state of the Jewish people, a partner who is prepared to address Israel's legitimate security concerns seriously, a partner who wants a Palestinian state not to continue the conflict with Israel, but to end it once and for all. Rather than helping to advance peace, many in the international community are setting back the cause of peace by convincing Palestinians that they can have a state without making peace with Israel. Recognizing a Palestinian state without demanding an end to the Palestinian Authority's agreement with Hamas, an internationally recognized terrorist organization, is absurd. Recognizing a Palestinian nation state without demanding that the Palestinians recognize the nation state of the Jewish people is unjust. Recognizing a Palestinian state without demanding an end to incitement in official Palestinian media and schools is reckless. And recognizing a Palestinian state without demanding robust security arrangements to enable Israel to protect itself in the peace, this is dangerous. If the issue of Palestinian statehood is brought before the UN Security Council outside the context of a peace agreement with Israel, this should be flatly rejected. If any one-sided anti-Israel resolution is brought before that council, it should be vigorously opposed. Meanwhile, various European state assemblies voted in principle to recognize a Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. British lawmakers voted overwhelmingly on October the 13th in favor of a non-binding motion to recognize the state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel as a contribution to securing a negotiated two-state solution. On October the 30th, Sweden officially recognized the state of Palestine. On November the the 18th, Spanish lawmakers adopted a motion calling for the Spanish government to recognize a Palestinian state. It was adopted nearly unanimously in the lower house of Parliament with 319 in favor, 2 against, and 1 abstention. The text asks the Spanish government to recognize Palestine as a state subject to international law, while adding that the only solution to the conflict is the coexistence of 2 states, Israel and Palestine, reached through negotiations. Spanish Foreign Minister Jose Manuel Garcia Margallo said the motion is not binding, it does not set a timeline for the recognition, and it gives the government the margin to proceed with the recognition when it feels it will be best. If we want to be effective, this recognition must be done in coordination with the European Union, he added. In response, the Israeli Foreign Ministry said, when the Palestinians are permitted to understand, howbeit mistakenly, that they can achieve anything they want without a return to negotiations and without the required compromises, all that is achieved in practice is the further postponement of the Palestinian return to the negotiating table, the officials said. This is a serious mistake here in conflict resolution when you make it more difficult to achieve something rather than contributing to it and promoting a solution, they added. On December the 2nd, French lawmakers voted in favor of recognizing Palestine as a state. The motion was supported by 339 lawmakers, with 151 voting against. However, the vote was symbolic and will not immediately affect France's diplomatic stance toward the peace process. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius stopped short of supporting the parliamentary motion, saying that the government wants to try other pathways to a negotiated settlement, including setting a timeline for a negotiated settlement in a UN Security Council resolution. At the United Nations, France is working with our partners to try to have a resolution adopted by the Security Council in order to relaunch negotiations and bring them to a conclusion, Fabius said. A 2-year time frame is often mentioned for that purpose. The French government agrees with this duration. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the French parliament would be making a grave mistake in recognizing a Palestinian state. Do they have nothing better to do at a time of beheadings across the Middle East, including that of a French citizen? Netanyahu said. The state of Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people, the only state that we have. The Palestinians are demanding a state while not willing to recognize the right of the Jewish people to have a state of their own. Denmark's parliament will vote on a resolution calling on the government to recognize a Palestinian state in early January 2015. The parliament directs the government to recognize Palestine as an independent and sovereign state within pre-1967 borders and by extension provide the state of Palestine with full diplomatic rights, the draft text says. A vote by the European Parliament over whether to recognize a Palestinian state is scheduled for mid-December. The original vote was postponed. Israeli diplomatic officials said the move was delayed for 3 reasons. Number 1, emerging difficulties between the various parties regarding the language of the resolution. Number 2, opposition by some members of the parties, especially from Germany, to the resolution. And number 3, intensive work done by Israeli diplomats in Brussels to postpone the vote, hoping to gain more time to change their minds. In a meeting with the Czech Prime Minister, Netanyahu said that Israel's need to be recognized as a Jewish state by the Palestinians, as well as the necessity for solid security arrangements on the ground, which are so essential to peace, are not being addressed by the European countries that unilaterally give recognition to a Palestinian state. I think these European positions actually push peace away, and I believe that they make reaching a solution much harder. These calls don't tell the Palestinian Authority that they will have to make genuine compromises. Well, that's going to conclude this week's report, where we shared with you the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.